Greetings, my name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the core and core, and anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor or student, as well as anybody else that shows up. But my focus is mostly on surviving as an instructor. And I picked surviving because Joseph Pilates was a survivor. That's the adjective that is most foundational to me and my view of Pilates. So, if this is your first time or you haven't heard much of me before, I'm assuming that you have. To be a little more abstract than I normally am, when I talk, I only have two things today. Two things. Number one is moving in a line. And so by that I mean holding your hips, shoulders, and ears up straight as you go in and out on the reformer in the stomach massage flat back. Okay? You're moving through space and you're holding a vertical line. In martial arts, I remember about heaven and earth and that you want to move through space. And to me, I would say holding vertical or being in the advantage of being vertical as you move through space. And so that's like straight, okay? Straight, examples of straight. And then curved would be the reformer stomach massage round back. There you are moving through space in a curve. And notice that you start with the curve when you do the sequence because you're closer to center, and being in extension or a line, you're further away from the center that begat you by virtue of being straight. Anyway, rotation, round is first as a curve in the pattern in Pilates. And then flat. And flat makes you think of lateral bending or the plane. So this is this plane, and this is this plane. And then there's rotation between those planes as a progressive pattern that's apparent within Joe's original work. Just as Matt, if you want to look at it. But the more you have access to his work, the clearer it is. But it's there in his mat work, in his book. So, defining a line. So on the reformer, again as a piece of apparatus upon which a sequence is performed, historically, of course, so anybody that's into historical reenactments would show the reformer in the order that it came from Joe in, and part of that being, in my opinion, the rocking, the swimming, and the grasshopper. So in the rocking, you're in extension with contact points because you have a grip, okay? And you make motion that you can, connected to the straps through your feet, by the way. There's external tension in this. But the shape is primarily round and trying to be dynamic in the round with the advantage of having a grip that gives you contact points and an ability to engage in tension that you don't have when you're swimming. So you're still trying to maintain extension in the act of swimming arms and legs out, your face down, swimming. And then to go from that, the grasshopper, is to take the shape that you had and held in swimming into a movement of the rocking in the grasshopper, showing the ability to, or the effort to, maintain the line, not only just static in space, but then moving through space, holding the line. Maybe that's what the title should be, Holding the Line. My point would be to you, from this point of view, is that understanding core nu tension takes you into unlocked knees and metatarsals as endpoints of tension, from which you get more control. And that's my claim, and of course I'm just pointing to you to experience it for yourself if you're capable, or you have a good teacher and you know what you're doing, or any of that, right? All of that. But in making an endpoint of tension at the metatarsals, you complete the capacity of uniform engagement that the rest of the body is structured in the same way as the metatarsals are. Meaning the body has these capacities to control rotational dynamic within itself. Is that so outrageous? And furthermore, that those oppositional rotations interplay across all of them and primarily act in opposition to the ones nearest to it to gain the advantage of what I identify as core nu tension. So I'm just pointing to evolution, and that the body does that, and it's the way the body moves through space. And being aware that engaging in core nu tension throughout is the most efficient way to distribute the load of your body in space, still or moving, but especially moving. You're lightest in space when you're most evenly distributing your load. And that's why the future of Pilates will acknowledge the physics of the biomechanics of core nu tension, and in so doing, a child's laughter is always such a delightful distraction. But a distraction nonetheless. And then it changes character, and you experience the spectrum of everything. Moving in a line. So from the MMP point of view, oh, okay, and that's where that would come into. But I don't have one here. Hold up a chain, any chain, and it makes a curve. And the shape of that curve is Y. What defines, hold up a chain between 2 points, and it makes a curve. What defines the shape of that curve? Because something does, if you don't know that. And so it's a trick question, because there's an answer. And in sign language, that would be right this, that gravity, right? Gravity, cargo, karga, gravity. The shape of that curve is called a catenary. And it's defined by gravity. And what's even more interesting is when you turn that curve upside down, still the shape of a catenary, what word in the definition of Pilates relates to why the catenary is used in building. It's used for the St. Louis Arch because of how well it distributes the load of what's up there in space, the load of itself. So the curve distributes the load of itself most efficiently, best, by being in the shape of this curve called a catenary defined by gravity, which is no big surprise. When it comes to endpoints of tension and the human being in space, still or moving, I suspect, I have no proof and no tests and no facts, none of that, but I suspect that the dynamics that we create within our body that define those axes of rotation, the ends of which I call endpoints, that those endpoints on that curve, to whatever extent they're close to being on that curve, they're close to taking advantage of the efficiencies of that curve, which are worth paying attention to if they build the St. Louis Arch because of that, and you're in your body and you know how to engage it, and you're aware of endpoints to the point that you know how to actually engage your metatarsals. So, coming back on this point that there's this curve, and then there's this curve that rocks or moves through space, right? Now you can be in the shape of the swan, of course, that's extension, and when you rock through space, ideally you want the line through your body to be elongating. So, out away from center. And the way the body accomplishes that is through core nu tension. And the metatarsals and their engagement go all the way to the ears. And when you use your imagination as well as your physical capacities to make endpoints of tension at your metatarsals and feel the curl around your ears that connects to your metatarsals through the rotation at your shoulders, hips, knees, and ankles. Okay. I'm suggesting that that kind of tension is better, that allows you for this eccentric elongation, this stretching of the line through your body, is the way you're able to maintain the shape of the body as it's moving through space, whether it's a straight line or a curve. And that in your imagination, even though I've never seen it embodied, coming up even an extension seeking to be in the curve of the catenary, helps your elongation reach out for that shape, knowing that it is the curve that distributes the load most efficiently. So look it up. Catenary. C-A-T-E-N-A-R-Y. I probably didn't say as much as I had notes on, but that's enough. Number two is mind the gap. And that's a saying in London in the subway for mind the gap between the platform that you're standing on and the actual carriage, trolley, whatever they would call it. But between you and what moves, there's a gap. And you always hear mind the gap. And the gap that I'm talking about from the MMP point of view, okay, is that there's a gap between Pilates and dance, and there's a gap between Pilates and physical therapy, and there's a gap between Pilates and anything else, because from this point of view, Pilates has an essence of its own, uniquely defined, and is a gift from one human being to all of humanity. So on social media, on Facebook, Jillian Hasso has shared a video clip of something she teaches that she got from someone that she learned from. To compensate for a particular condition in the body. And so right there, to me, there's a gap between what you're seeking to do in Pilates for the sake of Pilates and what you do to modify Pilates in the case of an individual. And I could stop right there and just do the period, but that individual then obviously has issues that you're using Pilates to address. Okay. And so in that realm, the gap is between Pilates and physical therapy, because in taking your pursuit of Pilates toward an issue, or to compensate or change Pilates because of an issue, just in order to make a distinction, please don't be enraged, but physical therapy goes toward the issue. And when you're done with physical therapy, you're supposed to go out into the world and be part of the population. And that's where Pilates takes over, usually, because Pilates is about training to go forward, regardless of where you've been or what you come to the training with. The MMP point of view is to, use your own experience. There's experience to be had that you can decide for yourself on if you have the experience, what it means, or whatever. I'm just calling it the complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit, where body, mind, and spirit is being, thinking, and observing. And whatever those three words refer to, it takes a combination of three things, hopefully, that those three words can be coordinated by into an experience as a state of being in the moment, in the body, in the moment of the doing. It's a now thing. All right, there. I see what I was doing right there. All right, so in the example I saw, the idea was to be in side bending, and the alteration was to turn it into a twist in order to alleviate an issue. It doesn't matter. For me, if I were sitting next to you watching that demonstration, I'd be fascinated, and I'd be looking at it, and I'd think, okay, I see where that's coming from and why, given the issue of the subject, and which, let's just say, was roughly addressing scoliosis, but a lot. And a really experienced instructor, such a gift that she shares this. But with you watching, I'd be pointing to the gap between what the exercise is meant to be about, which is in a lateral plane, and then coming out of that, for whatever reason, you leave the purpose of the exercise, and there's the gap. Another example, again on the reformer in the short box, where if you go to side overs, which is a variant I know, but convenient because you anchor the foot by a strap and you have your upper body weight to act as a feed to the stretch and to the effort, of course, and the interaction between those. But it's a loading thing, and you're side bending. And the idea and the point of the exercise can be just do sideways, or what it's evolved into is adding a twist in it as part of the effort. Okay? See, and this comes down, I think where I'm headed is, it comes down to pursuit of the is it overexpression, maybe? Or it's overextension, or the changing something from staying in plane to making rotation. That's what I'm talking about in the body, right? And at least having an appreciation of knowing an original intent, or at least an original expression, and I would call that intent of Joe in terms of being in plane. From the MMP point of view that looks at Pilates and comes up with a definition of uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement, it's about the progressive pattern of movement and to what extent progressing within an exercise meant for one expression extended into what's next. Within MMP, there's a target that you aim for, okay? And that target is the ideal. Whatever you presume the ideal to be overall within Pilates, and especially, or more practically, the ideals of being straight in limb, making straight lines, and smooth curves, and being able to hold them dynamically as you move through space. And dance and pointed toes and locked knees are one thing. And Joe's words in his book, locked knees and pointed toes, is one thing. But if you pursue his definition, his promise, and his sequence, MMP thinks you get to an experience that takes you out of dogma into the embrace of the experience more fully by going in, when I'm talking about the unlocked knees and metatarsals with an endpoint, to distribute load. As I said, abstract, right? All right, so that's mind the gap. So, Pilates is so effective, has been so effective, that everyone comes to it and wants remedy, if not recourse, meaning remedy from their pain, or recourse to stay out of pain, like stay uninjured. I'm a dancer, I got injured, Pilates fixed me. I'm a dancer, I got injured, Pilates fixed me. Well, instead of just stopping doing Pilates, I'm just going to keep doing Pilates because I'm a better dancer because of it. That's history, right? But when you do Pilates, it's different than when you dance. If when you dance, you're creating an artistic impression of locking and pointed toe, for example, for whatever reason, versus what you do in Pilates to accomplish your ideal in Pilates, which is to develop the body uniformly. That's a whole body thing. That to get to whole body, you gotta engage in core tension, and that means letting go of an abrogation. Well, it's not even an abrogation, because Joe's own words early in his book instruct that. So I'm more than willing to say, here you are in totally classical reenactment, historical reenactment, and there's a gondola ride to another point of view. And in that point of view, there's an ideal to reach for. And that reaching for the ideal is the means of whatever manifests as real. I try to say that again, but I think rewinding it, just leaving it that way, is better. So it's totally fascinating and absorbing and can be consuming, and the only point of view you have is to take whatever expression or exposure you have to Pilates and use that as part of everything else you have to be a healer or a physical therapist, wherein you're dealing with applying Pilates to issues. That's all I mean by that, right? Issue oriented. And in Mind the Gap, whenever you take what you know about Pilates as an ideal and then adapt it to an issue to the body, rather than take the body to the ideal, there's a gap. And I'm not saying, as an instructor, I don't go both ways. I don't head toward physical therapy and I head toward the ideal as the situation is called for. What I want you to realize is the difference in direction so that you can make a distinction and see the gap so that you understand that an endpoint of metatarsals is the future of Pilates, and because of the physics that are involved, that Pilates reflects. Pilates is a reaction to reality. That's been my point, I think, yesterday when we were talking about music and language and Pilates. In my experience as a Pilates instructor, I've had an amazing group of brave students. many of whom were challenged in ways that could always take my heart captive. In the humility of their valor, seeking to be the best of themselves. And in that spectrum of what we're dealt with in our being as human beings, for as much as Pilates is easily dragged into being issue-oriented, I feel that the best Pilates is in the direction of the ideal within it. And to get the best results from what Pilates has to offer is to aspire towards its ideal nature. And so, the point I'm trying to come to to survive as a Pilates instructor is that no matter what you see in the spectrum of capacity within the human being, to the extent that you take something that is the pursuit of an ideal and you then cast it towards application to a specific, there's a gap in that. And to the extent that I try to take a student towards the ideal, because that's what ends up as real, and not only real philosophically, but real experientially, right? Because whatever our being as humans, in the spectrum of expression that humans have, the reality of the physics and the biology in which we have expression maintains an ideal nature to it that we aspire towards because of its realness. Meaning, this is real. Gravity is real. Lining up in gravity, knowledge, see, where does that come from? It comes from the experience, for one thing, right? And it's the experience that acknowledges the situation, meaning the virtue of the alignment. I like that, the virtue of alignment. So, within this point of view, MMP, diving into scoliosis is a fascinating rabbit hole because of the complexities and the nuances and the ways to approach it, and all of that happens within the consistency of gravity. So the way out of the rabbit hole is to recognize what is consistent throughout, rabbit hole or not. I've had students that knew they were imbalanced because they didn't want to draw attention to it. They just wanted an ability to engage in an ideal effort as best they could, as whole-bodied as they could. And when you get down to the MMP point of view, requiring observing as something that's coordinated with being and thinking, delivering those goods no matter what the issue is where I think you would stand out in your artistry as a Pilates instructor. MMP is just one point of view out of as many people have opinions. Pilates is the mother of 10,000 views, and this is just one of them. Life can't live forever. Read between the lines. See behind the curtain. Evaluate points of view. And don't undercut the value of what you instruct to miss the opportunity for it being valued for what it is. And maybe it's worth nothing, but evaluate points of view in terms of scarcity and in terms of commonality or distinction. And based on that, add 2 and 2. Based on directing your thinking. Discern the difference between your mind just off playing Walter Mitty or fantasizing or investing in a world of your own design that has, daydreaming. As soon as you can recognize when you're daydreaming, well, I was really daydreaming, that at least for me helps me say, now I want to direct my thinking. I don't want to spend all my time doing that. And that points out to me and to you, I hope, that directing your thinking is an effort, and it's something more than just letting yourself think about whatever thoughts come up. Living in whatever fantasy world you feed through your thinking, direct your thinking. And ideally, some of it gets connected to what you're observing. Because life can't live forever. Enjoy that coordination while you can. Geist.